free racing pigeon tips and lots of info. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, look at the links and email below. The airways of the pigeon. The engine of the pigeon. It all starts here. Performance is directly related to the efficiency of the respiratory and circulatory systems, so that both can meet the high energy demands imposed during flight. For example, during normal training around the loft, the oxygen consumption of the pigeons can increase up to 15 times, and can increase up to 30 times if they do so with headwinds. These massive loads on energy requirement can only be properly absorbed if we start from the basis of excellent health and fitness. A respiratory disease that involves both the lungs and the air sacs will seriously affect sports performance, not only due to the fact that it impairs the oxygen supply, but also the energy production areas, liver, muscle, etc., will be affected. Respiratory problems that affect the air sacs reduce performance because both the oxygen supply and the ability to eliminate waste products will be impaired. The resulting muscle cramps will make it impossible for the pigeon to even be able to fly. When a respiratory infection inflames the nasal cavity and upper respiratory tract, the pigeon's organism loses an important part of the ability to control the considerable production of heat generated during the flight. With certain respiratory infections, the first sign we may notice is the presence of panting during or after a workout. Gasping is a mechanism that is activated to dissipate excess heat quickly. It is also possible to observe a wave-like movement of the neck or jowls, a form of panting. In pigeons with excess heat, this is known as flapping of the bag or gular sac. Unfortunately, during panting, the body becomes dehydrated, losing as much water as heat. It is also possible that we can see pigeons that have not yet developed optimal physical conditions pant, especially if they train early in the morning, late in the afternoon, or with too much intensity around the loft. It is important that the breeder knows how to differentiate between the types of panting visible in healthy pigeons and those caused by respiratory infections. Review of the oral and nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is connected to the oral cavity through the choanal cleft, choana, or palatal cleft. Pay special attention to this area during the competition season. A narrowing of this cleft when there is a nasal cavity infection accurately reflects the inflammation present along the upper respiratory tract. Obviously, the inflammation in this area will affect the ability to regulate the temperature and humidity of the nasal cavity, resulting in lower sports performance. Inflammation of the ear muffs or ears, eye irritation, and excess foam in the throat are obvious signs of a respiratory tract infection. The reverse is also true, and I agree with those fans who believe that a fully open cleft denotes a pigeon in top form. The upper respiratory tract has the nostrils, which are associated with the oral cavity, by the ears. The ears are immediately below the eye, and when bacteria or parasites, for example, Trichomonas, are located in them, they are only hardly removed from there. There is therefore no localized treatment, in the eye or the nostrils, that can totally solve the problem. The disease, or even more, the bad sports performances that occur, require consulting a competent veterinarian. The throat. In the throat of the pigeon we find one of the indicators of its state of form that is more unknown by most of the pigeon growers and yet one of the essential factors of its anatomy, which is the object of study. Located in the upper internal part of the throat of the pigeon there is a fleshy curtain. This kind of membrane is an effective indicator of the respiratory power of the pigeon, and where extreme effort can leave marks that indicate to the breeder that the bird has suffered acute sports stress. If we take into account that here, through the throat, all the oxygen that the bird requires for competition enters, on the way to the lungs and ultimately to the blood flow, it is not surprising that renowned pigeon men have studied this essential part of the world for years. The anatomy of pigeons and its importance in the correct respiratory transit during sporting efforts. As is known to all, pigeons are birds capable of traveling long distances at considerable speed without rest and without reaching a state of extreme oxygen deficiency, thanks to an aerobic respiratory system unique among birds. This is coordination of the respiratory rhythm with the flutter frequency. For each flutter a breath is produced. The pigeon that flaps 8 to 10 times per second will also take the same number of breaths per second, unlike other birds that breathe only once for every 3 or 4 flaps. If we remember that a pigeon can flap 35,000 times in a single hour, the rate of respiration and the intake of oxygen must be done at high speed and in perfect coordination of all the organs involved. Respiratory tracts. Air sac. Lungs. And circulatory system. That is why it is so important that the pigeon can breathe correctly if we expect it to obtain optimal results. A pigeon with respiratory deficiencies will not be able to supply its body with enough oxygen to be able to win. And it is at this point where the importance of observing and interpreting the state of the bird's throat is understood. From continuous observation over time we will obtain concrete data on the state of the bird, possible states of stress or other problems. The throat color must be perfect and not irritated so that the air passes easily into the larynx. Of the curtains mentioned above, it is more important that they are not wrinkled or too far apart from each other than they are somewhat separated or off the hook. They must be arranged in a straight line and both be of similar proportions. During the mating season or the molt or any other cause of alteration or stress, it is inadvisable to observe the throat because during these periods it will be affected by set excitement or in chicks that are too young, less than 6 months old. To carry out this observation, the bird must previously be in maximum rest and relaxation. There are 3 points that we will try to evaluate. The separation and straight fall between the throat curtains. The parting should be similar to that of a hair. A larger parting will indicate lower quality. The color should be pink. It will be considered the optimal color. Possible marks on the curtain. Slight horizontal lines will denote stress. The reliable interpretation of the state of the pigeon through its throat requires patience, skill and observation on the part of the pigeon farmer, who will have another element to take into account when assessing the quality of a particular pigeon.